So I wanted to share with you this repeat pattern madness that I've been going through the past week and a half or so. I thought about doing a tutorial on how to make repeat patterns, and I could do that if you're interested. But in this video, I thought I'd rather share with you the story behind how I got into repeat patterns and what I learned. So it all started with this pattern. Someone contacted me through Instagram and asked me if I could make this into a repeat pattern. So my first reaction was, sure, why not? And my second reaction was to panic because I have no idea how to do it. So I tried to figure it out, and I found that there is a repeat pattern called a mirrored repeat. And the mirrored repeat you can apply immediately without any editing. You're just mirroring the edges over and over, and so anything can become a mirrored repeat. The thing about a mirrored repeat, though, is that you get this kaleidoscope effect, and it's a very specific look. It doesn't really look like what you would expect a repeat to look because of the mirroring. And then I thought I could watch a few tutorials and try to make this into a repeat in Photoshop. And wow, I watched a lot of videos and read a lot of tutorials. And then I realized that this is a very special case because this pattern is very packed. There's no negative space, there's no air in between the shapes. And when there's more air, you can more easily manipulate it. But when it's packed in this way, it's much harder to do, but it is possible. And so I tried various ways and I got it to work. It took me quite a few hours of work in Photoshop. I'm only just starting to learn to use Photoshop, so it's possible that if I were more skilled, then it would take less time. I don't know. In addition to the mirrored repeat, there's a grid repeat and there's a half break repeat. And the half break repeat, it makes more of an illusion that it's not really a repeat. It's harder to find the repeat, so I wanted to go for the half break. And after working so hard in Photoshop to make this into a repeat, I thought to myself, well, maybe I could paint something similar and make it so that it's easier to seam it together later in Photoshop. So what I did was I painted and then I traced this line down here and drew it in pencil up here, and then I continued the shapes down so that this would seam up with this. And I did the same thing on these sides. So I sort of hacked it together. It did work. I did have to adjust it in Photoshop, though it was a lot less work than with this first one, which was quite a lot of work. I'm not sure that the method I used here is perfect, but it's one way to do it, I guess. This is a grid repeat, actually. I was also asked if I could make this into a repeat pattern, and that was an insane amount of work. What I did was to create a brick repeat in Photoshop and then fix all of the edges. And so I actually manipulated the shapes in Photoshop. I completely modified the design to make this repeat, and it took quite a lot of work to do. To be honest, at some stages, my mind was going crazy, but when I took a break and came back to it and actually finished it, I was very proud of myself, and I actually think I learned a bit about using Photoshop by doing this. I used the stamping tool and I used a lasso tool to duplicate and create different shapes. For example, you can see that this shape, I closed it together to make almost a circle, and this shape I duplicated and put it behind this shape. I used masking and all sorts of hacks to get this to work. And I hope that if I keep at it, I'll find a more streamlined way to do this. But yeah, this is much harder than making a repeat where there are like just a bunch of flowers scattered over negative space. I also made these feathers into a repeat, also a brick repeat. So what I did was erase these top feathers and have these feathers look as if they're going up behind these feathers. And I also seamed together these edges by taking feathers from here and putting them on the side over here. So this was also quite a few hours of work in Photoshop. I do wonder if this could take less time to do, or maybe it's better to paint the painting in advance to fit into a repeat. I don't know, I'm still learning. And the last thing I did was this. So it started off as an A4 sheet of paper. It was this size, A4. I started drawing by going all the way to these edges, but not to these edges, and filling in this space over here. And then I cut it and turned it like this, and I completed the shapes here, and then I turned it like this and completed the shapes here, and I turned it like this and completed the shapes here, and that creates a brick repeat. Now, how did I figure this out? A lot of thinking, a lot of trial and error, a lot of practicing. This is after I figured some of this stuff out myself and I tried to explain to myself how to do it. It's not perfect explanation yet. And this is also a trial run I did where I actually cut the paper into 4 and made it work. Now you can also do this directly in Photoshop. It'll probably be easier than doing it on paper, but only if you do a grid repeat. After I finished this one, I scanned it into Photoshop and I had quite a bit of cleaning up to do along the edges. Even though they match pretty much perfectly in real life, I guess the way I scanned it, they didn't match perfectly. And rather than rescanning, for some reason, I decided I'd clean it up in Photoshop, and that took, I don't know, a couple of hours. So I had to clean up this edge and this edge, this edge, this edge. And after I did that, I made it so that I could change the foreground color and the background color to whatever I wanted and uploaded it to Redbubble so that I could see it on products, which is pretty cool. I hope you found this video interesting. If you did, leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one.